Chapter 61. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Diane felt all of the memories swimming in his mind. Some had array locks on them, while some weren't paths in cultivation he wanted to take, but a lot of it was useful. He felt that his aurora had entered the middle blossom stage and was even faintly closing in on the higher blossom stage, only one more push and he'd be there. Diane was the most happy to find many soul cultivation methods in his memories. Rather than relying on the passive growth of his soul, he could finally be more active about it. Coming past a certain memory, Diane smiled bitterly. It seems like the massive array I passed through was actually a concealment array. I wouldn't have even seen it had Master not wanted me to. No wonder this place managed to remain hidden for so long. That sinister aura must have also been Martial Father's demon chi leaking. Diane took a deep breath. Though the celestial lady had never said anything about going so far, he did it anyway. You're the only master I'll bow to in this life. Diane bowed deeply, clasping his hands in respect towards the dead body of the celestial deer, the 25th White Mother of the celestial deer clan. I will always remember you. Your disciple won't fail you. It seemed like the 25th White Mother was the last of her clan. The war of the celestial deer clan ended in mass genocide. Diane had a feeling that a part of the sealed memories in his mind were actually the details of what happened all those years ago. After bowing towards his martial father, Diane walked out of the tomb, closing the heavy doors to let them rest in peace. Alright, according to these memories, much of the good things of the sect were looted in the war. However, the things a sect powerful enough to destroy the celestial deer clan would find useless enough to leave behind, or maybe less important to pick up during a raging war, would be incomprehensible to the lower realms of the martial world. So, I think I'll check out the vaults too. There are a few arrays that the invaders couldn't break through too. Maybe there's a method in Master's memory. After walking for about an hour and stroking Little Black's fur, Diane finally came to the weapons vault. As he expected, much of the higher floors were looted. But the lower levels were filled with weapons. My spatial ring isn't enough to take all of it, there isn't enough space. I guess I'll only take a few then. Maybe a lyre as a gift to Madeline. I'm not sure about Eli's martial cultivation, but I'm sure if I take a few, he'll find one he likes. I should thank Delia with a sword too. I owe Ava as well, she did save my life twice. Diane walked along the shelves looking through the weapons. These are all master-level weapons. These are what they left behind. How powerful were the weapons they actually took? The blacksmithing, and by proxy the weapons ranking system, worked much the same way the array alchemy system worked. The beginning was the common level, then the practitioner level, then the master level followed by the grandmaster level. So, a master-level weapon was most useful to someone who had crossed over the meridian formation stage and entered the essence gathering stage. That wasn't to say those of lower cultivations couldn't use them, but just that the power wouldn't be maximized unless you reached that level. If a master-level weapon appeared in Focus Academy, no, even the big sects, the commotion would be enough to start a war, even for the weakest of them. Diane found a sparkling lyre for Madeline as well as a defensive protection hairpin. He found a short sword that had a white handle with Lily's chain to the end for Delia. Since Diane wasn't sure what Eli would want, he just picked whatever looked interesting. As Diane was about to leave, a side room caught his eye. Oh. What's in there? Diane walked up to what looked like a door, but there was no handle. When he focused his gaze, he realized that it wasn't possible to see this door without his aurora. From his master's memories, he realized that this door was sealed by a special array and could only be opened by filtering in innate aurora flames. Diane's hands gently pressed against the door. It heated under his touch, before the door pushed in and disappeared upwards. This, if the invaders knew they had left this behind, they'd cough up blood with regret. This was a room the celestial deer clan created specifically looking for proper successors once they knew their end was inevitable. The weapons here were all of the spiritual grade and there was even one of each and every kind. If it wasn't for his master's memories, Dian wouldn't even be worthy of recognizing these treasures and their ranks at all. To put this matter into perspective, there was the common, then practitioner, then master, then grandmaster grades. Only above this, a step beyond, would spiritual grade weapons appear. And here I was about to give my Madeline a subpar liar when there's this here. There were tens of pedestals, filled with short swords, long swords, flexible and rigid spears, musical instruments for those who cultivated the will of music, whips, clubs, hammers. The sect really covered all their bases. Although Dian wasn't familiar enough with weapons to make an accurate ranking of them within the spiritual grade, he concluded that they were at least high level, ranging from the 7th to 9th spiritual level. However, this was only the very beginning of the surprises. At the end of the room, Dian caught sight of a ring. It swirled with vivid colors like it was the night sky, and northern lights shrunk to the size of a finger band. Dian picked it up and threw his senses into it. But, what he saw left him reeling. Chapter 62. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Inside, there was an incomparably vast world. Since when could storage rings store life? Dian was stunned speechless. The space inside the ring was at least hundreds of kilometers. It was filled with fields of high-level herbs. Off to the side, Dian noticed a pile of millions of stones. They were so high-grade he had no idea what level of stone it was. He was only familiar with profound stones, but these were clearly more potent. He was aware that common stones, profound stones, and so on were actually used to help cultivation. As such, they were the perfect currency for the cultivation world. But, he was absolutely sure that if he tried to absorb the energy within the stones he was looking at, he'd implode. According to Master's memories, these are Tao stones. I won't have a strong enough body to use these until I reach the peak of the celestial realm, a step away from Tao formation, That's 5 full realms away from me. I can't even use these as currency, even if I disregard the danger. Who would be able to give me proper change? Dian shook his head bitterly. If you were going to leave me wealth, you could have left something I could use. I can still use them though. If I ever need to power a formation in the future, I could just use one. In fact, I could probably use one to power multiple strong formations. Also, these plants might be useful in my creating cultivation pills for myself in the future. Dian slipped the ring onto his finger. His eyes flashed with gold as he diligently worked on a concealment array his master had left him. After failing a few times, and after hours of painstaking work, he finally succeeded in creating a 5th practitioner level concealment array. It was the highest grade of array he had ever formed. As long as it wasn't someone with an innate aurora, or as long as they weren't at the saint stage which preceded the essence gathering stage who had the intent to see through him, they wouldn't be able to see the rarity of his ring. In every way, it would look like a low-level storage ring. Dian was actually planning on doing this with the weapons as well. If he lowered them to peak practitioner level weapons, then, although they'd be coveted, it wouldn't be to the point of causing large-scale wars. As his cultivation increased, he'd slowly reduce the concealment. Dian turned and was about to continue to place all the weapons in his new ring when he suddenly had a wild thought. Why don't I place the whole building into the ring? There's more than enough space. Actually, I should be able to fit the whole of the Celestial Deer sect in it. Maybe that was the other purpose of the array Master set up. It made the whole sect one entity. It should be recognizable by the ring. Alright. That's what I'll do after I'm finished training. According to Master's memories, there are a whole bunch of training arrays I can use the Tao stones to power. It would be inconvenient if I had to come back here just to train. It's much better if I take it with me. But first, I want to master the pill condensation technique so I can cure Madeline. Dian was about to walk out of the room when his eyes fell on a long pitched black sword. He hadn't really taken any weapons he saw before to heart. But this seemed to resonate with him. The sword must have been pushing 7 feet long. It had a slight curve to it, and its guard was continuous with the blade. its only distinguishing feature being the blazing black suns rotating around it. Everything about the sword was domineering. It seemed that just by looking at it, Diane would be sliced in half. Diane walked up with steady steps, a sharp light in his eyes. "You'll be my weapon." Roar. The sword vibrated in protest, its rage palpable. Diane looked on unperturbed. "I've said it, so I mean it. You either submit now, or you can rot here until I decide I'm strong enough to come back and force you. At that time, you won't be my partner. You'll be my slave. I'll snap you in half. I'll use you to plunge toilets. If you're lucky, I might even use you to scratch my back. Make your choice now and hurry. I'll give you 5 seconds." Diane's voice was domineering. His eyes had turned jet black and black scales covered in shining crystals started to appear on him. His shirt burst open causing Little Black to scurry to his head as he looked on in excitement. The sword, though, was having none of it. Roar. The sword charged, trying to pierce Diane's forehead. An incomparably strong wind blasted Diane, but he remained expressionless as the sword charged towards his head. Bang! A trickle of blood fell from Diane's forehead as he looked on at the sword. His eyes were cold as he felt the sword slice through his head. But, his eyes remained unmoved. "You think your illusion will fool me?" The sword fell into Diane's hands, vibrating. Though it fell into dormancy, Diane could still feel an unbridled strength lashing out within it. After spending time concealing its aura to that of a first master level weapon, Diane finally headed to the pill room after changing into black sweats and a white tee. It wasn't that he didn't want to conceal the aura anymore, it was just that his sword couldn't stand to be seen as so weak. So, Diane could only shake his head bitterly after strapping the sword using a black master level weapons belt he found in the other room. A wave of medicinal fragrance as Diane walked into a pill room that was at least 10,000 square meters large. They really left all these high-level pills. Such a waste, bnoel.m. Chapter 63. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Scanning the room, Diane finally found the area where the Constitution Awakening pills were, smiling bitterly. No wonder they left them. These pills can only awaken 20% of a constitution at most. And that was at their peak. After so many years, they might be able to reach 5%. How would that be useful to a god-level clan? Clearly, they took all the stronger, better pills for themselves already. But Diane found the silver lining. There were thousands here, maybe hundreds of thousands. That was more than enough for him to practice his technique. He knew that a single 100% pill would require the combination of hundreds if not thousands of pills. But, luckily, he had a lot of chances. He'd start with 2 and increase 1 by 1. Then he'd do the same with the cleansing pill, so Madeline could cultivate like the genius she was. Diane sat down cross-legged and began to meditate on the pill condensation technique. It seemed simple enough, but, doing it with just his level was near impossible. Although his master had said it was possible, the truth was that that was only true if it was a pill within the range of a middle blossoming stage. If he wanted to do it for such a high-level pill, he'd need a clear understanding of the pill and the technique. The only reason the 25th White Mother had even suggested this to be possible was because of Diane's talent and his innate aurora, which made him capable of things a regular array alchemist wasn't. Diane took a deep breath, focusing his determination. "It'll be easy," he said sarcastically. Author's note. There is no in this coming scene, however it can still be difficult for some to read. For those who would like to skip over it, I suggest jumping to the last few paragraph sentences. Ball, I know you're Tammy's cousin and everything, but haven't you heard of personal space?" Ava said, quite annoyed. They had been in the elven forest for quite a while, but with each passing day Ball got more and more handsy, and his eyes had a sinister light that was making Ava more and more uncomfortable. Ball, though, didn't seem to care to reply to her. Ball looked over to Tammy. "There's less than a day left, right? Don't you think the others would have found the items by now? What is he talking about? Thought Ava. Tammy remained silent, trembling as she couldn't look her friend in the eye. Her voice shook, but through gritted teeth, I'll kill you with my own hands for this. Just you wait. Tammy erupted with her cultivation and vanished before their eyes. Bale's laugh filled the dark forest as he watched Tammy disappear. He seemed to find it all hilarious, he could hardly stop laughing. Ava froze, looking toward where Tammy had disappeared. The darkness of the forest seemed to become that much more eerie. "Lo, what's going on? Tammy's in the Meridian Formation realm. I thought she was in the 8th Formation stage layer." Ava suddenly screamed out in pain as Ball grabbed her chest from behind, slowly stroking her leg. "I've been waiting to savor you for a long time." She thrashed and fought, but the difference in their cultivation was too much. Ball clasped down so hard that tears welled up in her eyes, threatening to fall. The mixture of humiliation and pain made her heart almost beat out of her chest. Bang! Ava felt the air get knocked out of her as Ball slammed her against a tree, ripping apart her leather top and leering disgustingly. Ava wanted to cover her chest, but she felt sparks of electricity running through her, paralyzing her. She wanted to scream, but the lightning coursing through her veins wasn't allowing her to. Ball leaned into Ava's ear as she shivered, stroking her breasts with his hands. "How does it feel? Getting abandoned by your friend, I mean. I wonder how you'd react if you knew she left your brother like this too. She's quite a cold bitch, don't you think?" Ava trembled. She had promised herself that no matter what this sick bastard did, she wouldn't cry. But, what he had said had impacted her too much. This was exactly the kind of sight Ball wanted to see, that exact twisting, complicated pain dancing in Ava's eyes right now. Even within the darkness, it shone so bright that he almost moaned in pleasure before even getting a taste. Ball gripped her breast tightly as though to vent his lust, his eyes practically rolling back. Ava bit down hard on her lip, feeling the trickling blood run down her chin. Rip. Ava felt a cold breeze as her shorts were pulled away, but her eyes were dull, spilling out tears endlessly. A harsh pain ripped into her cheek as it slammed against the bark of a tree. Hidden deep within the foliage of some trees, Tammy's fingers dug into the solid wood, her blue eyes practically going red. A guilt she would never wash herself of flooded her mind and body. "I couldn't save Arios, and I couldn't save you." At that moment, a rustling sound came from a distance away, causing Ball to look over. "Oh. Looks like there are people who want to add to the fun, Ava." Ball leered at Ava's bare bottom. The moonlight trickled in just enough for him to catch a delectable sight. Ball suddenly noticed that Ava was too silent. Silence was fine, but her body showed no sort of reaction at all. Even though he hadn't gotten to the fun part yet, she was still a bit too controlled. "No. Ho ho ho, you actually killed yourself already. TSK. That's no fun." Bale's laughter was like a twisting knife in Tammy's heart. "It's too bad, I'm not above playing with a corpse. I've waited too long to not at least taste you." Ball flipped Ava over, cupping her cheek with a hand and watching her breasts fly and bounce around. Unfortunately, by the vacancy in her eyes, it was clear that Ava had already used some unknown method to end her life. A shame, a shame. At that moment, Bale's gaze suddenly narrowed. His body flashed and appeared dozens of meters away, letting Ava's naked corpse slump to the ground and appearing before two people who had encroached upon his fun. "Who?" Venus' voice boomed through the forest as she immediately jumped back with Eli's arm in her hand. Ball licked his lips. "Another beauty. And this one's actually alive, good. Oh, is he important to you? That's even better, that way you won't kill yourself before we get to the fun part, right?" Bale's grin shimmered beneath the moonlight. Chapter 64. You are listening at novelfull.audio. A look of disgust appeared on Venus' face as she noticed something crude and unsightly hanging out of Bale's pants. Eli shivered, but held on to his sister tightly. He refused to run away and leave his sister to defend him alone. Eli frantically scanned the area to find a way they might escape, but what he saw shook him to the core. Ava. Eli trembled as he noticed Ava's naked and lifeless body lying limply against a tree. Venus' face steeled as she noticed what Eli noticed. Eli. He's too strong for me. I need you to run when I make an opening. We'll be automatically teleported out soon, Venus whispered in a hurry. Ball slowly walked towards the siblings. You're quite cute too, little boy. I haven't had boy meat in a long time. How about I taste you too? Venus and Eli were going to react, but it was already too late. Bang! Venus was sent flying, her clothes charred by an arc of lightning, blowing away in ashes under the night sky. Sister! Tears streamed down Eli's face as he looked at Ball in hatred. There's the emotion I was looking for. You've woken me up. Bale's member stood disgustingly at full mast as he licked his lips. Ack! Ball grabbed a fist full of Eli's hair, licking the tears off of his face. How thoughtful of you, salting yourself up for me. Eli sent a kick flying at Bale's knee, but could only despair as he noticed Bale's lack of a reaction. Kicking me? That's not so nice, you know. Maybe as punishment I should make you watch me take your sister first. Ball dragged Eli over to where his sister was lying unconscious, pressing Eli's face firmly against her exposed chest. Eli's tears wouldn't stop. He couldn't understand how sick and demented a person had to be to do this. Your sister has quite an ample bosom, don't you think? He pressed Eli's cheek into one breast, forcing him to watch as he took a handful of the other, wantonly kneading. Don't lie, you have some fantasies about this sister of yours, right? Look at how beautiful she is. Bale's horrid laughter boomed as he slapped Eli lightly on the cheeks with a palm. Ball tossed him to the side, causing Eli to land limply on the ground. He could only watch as Ball rolled his sister over. Ball slowly licked his finger, sticking it up into the air as though he really cared to check the wind. Another virgin, Ball slapped Venus awake with his wet palm. Hey you, no sleeping. Venus groaned, jumping back in horror as she noticed the state of her body. You. Venus had not a care for her exposed body as she immediately sent vines towards Ball. Eli. Crush fire emblem, ice core, and fertilizing steed together now. Eli could barely move. He wanted to do exactly what his sister asked, but his tears could only grace the soil as he struggled. Venus looked over in despair as she realized the problem. She could only slowly back away as Ball approached her. You know you shouldn't hide such wonderful breasts from the world. After you die, maybe I'll mount them on some wood for everyone to see. A sinister glare flashed in Bale's eye. Just as Ball was about to reach Venus, flickering lights started to surround them. Fuck. Ball looked on in disgust as he disappeared. Venus sighed in relief, but then looked on in panic as she realized that the formation wasn't taking Ava's body since she was dead. Venus quickly pulled Ava into her ring before rushing to her brother and covering them in a blanket. Tears rushed down her face as she thought about what transpired. I'm sorry, Eli, sister's too weak to protect you. Eli could only watch his big sister cry as they disappeared. What they didn't know was that they weren't the only tragedy that took place in the elven forest that night. Everywhere, hundreds of students died as sacrifices. Their pride was trampled, their wills ignored, their dignity taken away. However, what the Pillar families and big sect leaders didn't know was that as soon as they decided to harm Diane's friends, their fates had been sealed. Thousands of miles away, in the hall of a dark palace, a crack resounded. Ha! Ava! An elder ran up to a line of soul crystals. He knew they connected to the lives of the clan members. If one cracked, it could only mean that one was either severely injured, or dead. She shattered part of her soul. She's pretending to be dead, she must be in real danger to use such a forbidden danger. It was as the elder thought, Ava had suspended herself in a death-like state to escape the situation and hopefully protect her virginity. But, she had underestimated how disgusting Baal was. He was planning on continuing even with her dead body. If it wasn't for Venus and Eli, who knows when it would have ended. To Ava, her virginity was secondary. The anger she felt in her heart was something that would never subside. Now she finally had a target, not just for herself, but for her brother who died far too early. The Storm family. The elder rushed to the throne room. Leader, the young mistress is in trouble. We can't afford to lose her and the young master. It's clear something is going on at Focus Academy. For two peak geniuses to be killed like this. It isn't a coincidence. Killed. A booming voice radiated from the throne. A man with fiery red hair raged as the floor cracked under his pressure. She isn't dead yet, sect leader. But, she used our clan's assassin's technique and shattered her soul. If we don't hurry, it'll become exponentially more difficult to repair. And, if the one who wants to kill her finds out she's alive, her life could be in danger. She's counting on us. Mobilize the assassin guilds. It seems this Focus Academy thinks I'm magnanimous because I let the death of my son go. No, I only think that a man should live under his own power. But, my daughter is different. I will not lose all of my children. If I have to destroy everyone in that academy, I will. Yes, leader, the elder bowed respectfully, his shoulders trembling beneath the might. The Sicarius clan was bustling. As an assassin clan, they normally worked in the shadows. In fact, no one knew that the Sicarius clan were the leaders of the assassin guilds. To most of the world, the Sicarius clan was a backwater clan near the edge of the continent. To the center of the continent, however, the Sicarius clan was the protector of the Royal God clan. And, to the Royal God clan, the Sicarius clan was the underground network of the continent. The might of the Sicarius clan wasn't something Focus Academy could face, unless the true Storm family revealed themselves, something they most definitely didn't want to do. But, it was looking like the Storm clan would have no choice but to fight. With all of their geniuses, their future, being concentrated at Focus Academy, and the fact Ava was actually alive and not dead and would be able to tell her truths after she awakened, how could the Storm clan stand by and watch their juniors be killed? It was looking more and more like the perfect storm. The ambitions of the Kami God clan, the sinister Dayu clan, the oblivious Pillar families, the helpless Sapientia family in Madeline, the big sects, the angered Sicarius clan, the evil Storm clan. Little did they know that in this clash of clans, a young 17-year-old boy sitting quietly in a pill room would have the biggest impact. We'll be back with more chapters tomorrow, could only get one out tonight. Chapter 65. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Ring. Ring. Heaven's chimes rung out as Diane looked on in satisfaction at 2 sets of 3 pills. It had taken him much longer than he wanted, 2 weeks, in fact, but he finally managed to make 3 100% effective Constitution Awakening pills and 3 Cultivation Cleansing pills. He didn't need 3 of each, but he thought that he might in the future. In fact, the cleansing pills might be an effective weapon if used properly. After combining them, they should be potent enough to clear the cultivation of a peak celestial stage expert. Thinking of that, Diane shivered. But, when he thought about it, he sobered up. It would be impossible to force something into the mouth of such an expert. Especially since whatever expert it was would be powerful enough to force him to use something he only had 3 of. Therefore, to use against an expert like that, he'd have to ground it into powder and toss it into the air. But, if used like that, it would probably only be effective against a peak essence gathering expert. Well, that'll have to be good enough for now. I only have a month left and all I've done is make 6 pills and learn the weapon's hell array. Speed arraying form. But, even with my increased body strength, I still have no movement techniques. Plus, I'd look like a clown if I try and use a sword now. I could use the spirit fruits in the world ring to fuse with the blood some more and increase my speed and strength, but I feel like techniques would be more effective now. I'll focus on sword, celestial, wind and space wills for now. With a small understanding of the celestial, wind and space, I'll have the bare minimum needed to use the celestial movement technique. Sword will is a necessity, Diane thought with a grin. Swinging a 7-foot-long sword while saving a beautiful girl would be fucking awesome. Of course, if others knew Diane's thoughts, they'd think him to be a madman. But, with the training rooms of the Celestial Deer sect at his disposal, he was in a unique position to make it work. Aside from this, Diane wanted to see if he could gain a better understanding of soul techniques and cultivation. But, he was very disappointed to find out that casting soul techniques took time and often had to be at long range with the support of a team. So, he decided to instead focus on defense. By learning a defensive soul technique known as Devour, should anyone attack him with their soul, he would not only be able to defend, but he'd also strengthen his soul quicker by absorbing their attack. Diane was happy to find out if he reached the second stage of this defensive skill, it could become an attack skill wherein which he could use contact to forcibly absorb memories, erase the will of people, and take their soul power as his own. Although Diane had learned the method of reading memories from people, those people had to either be unconscious, or allow it willingly. He wasn't as strong as his master, as such he could only settle for that. Over the course of his training, Diane learned much about soul cultivation etiquette as well. He learned about how it was smart to conceal one's soul strength so attackers would underestimate you and hurt themselves. He learned about how it was rude to use your soul to investigate others and how that could often lead to conflict. He also learned about innate souls and the fact that his soul only reached the peak of the middle blossoming stage so quickly because he was born with that strength, it was just that he couldn't manifest it because his body was too weak. It seemed that his innate soul was even more powerful than he thought it was. And, somehow, he still felt it had more room for growth, but his body had once again become a limiting factor. So, just like that, Diane focused on those techniques. His blood and sweat coated the training rooms. His muscles ached, and his mind learned the pain of training one's soul. He fought puppets and destroyed formations, running through tens of Tao stones a day to keep up with his training. He bathed in recovery pools, and sometimes stayed awake for chunks of 5 to 6 days without rest. He had one goal in mind, and one purpose. Focus Academy would soon feel his wrath. 1 month later, on the eve of the winter solstice, Diane walked out of the sword cultivation room. His eyes were sharp, his aura changed. His looks had a combined devilishness and otherworldly presence to it, and his each step seemed to slice apart the wind. Looking back at the cultivation room, a cold sweat drenched Diane's back. That sword intent room is ridiculous. Especially when I accidentally started up the max level. If it wasn't for the safety functions, I'd be dead. However, there was a pride in Diane's heart. Although he hadn't learned any sword techniques yet, he was more confident in his skills. In fact, with enough practice, he might one day break into a realm that made sword techniques obsolete. Soon, Diane was a bit disappointed that he couldn't use time manipulation cultivation rooms to learn wills because that would lead to their distortion. But, he believed that he had become strong enough to do what needed to be done. Diane had a great understanding of the fact most elders were only at the peak of the foundation stage. In addition, family heads would only be at the lowest tiers of the meridian formation stage. What Diane didn't know was that the big sect tournament was taking place on the same day. Diane's body flashed, disappearing from where he stood. Moments later he appeared above the massive array hiding the Celestial Deer sect. He had put Little Black in the ring while he was in the cultivation room so that the little guy could eat spirit fruits and sleep to his heart's content. With a wave of his hand, the massive sect lands disappeared. The water rushed to fill the empty space as Diane flashed again, traveling tens of meters in split seconds. His eyes were sharp, and his goal was singular. Focus Academy. Chapter 66. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Using a concealment array, Diane walked through the floors of Focus Academy. Anger he had buried for months was bubbling up in his heart, but he was taking deep breaths to try and calm down. He had no idea where Madeline was, and although fighting through the entirety of Sapientia Peak would vent his anger, it would also give the Kami family time to make countermeasures. His best option was to lay low and wait until he had his eyes on her before venting his frustration. So, he decided to go to Eli's room, 111, to see how his friend was doing. As Diane walked through the school, he was listening to the murmurs of the students. Since they couldn't see him, they spoke with no reservations. Did you hear about all the students who died in the Elven world? Yeah, there's a reason there used to be a quota and only the best of us could go, but for some reason they allowed any and everyone to enter this year. Diane's eyes narrowed. That may not be the case. I heard rumors that all these new students from Focus Academy showed up. And a lot of students who went to the Elven world talk about how brutal they were. Really? Who were they? Everyone thinks they're from the Storm family. They had the patented blonde hair and blue eyes. But, they were freakishly strong. We all thought the best geniuses they had were Tammy and Hawk, but they've hidden themselves so deeply. It doesn't seem to make much sense why, though. Maybe they're planning on taking the sect head position away from sect leader Paisha, Neva. I've heard a lot of elders are displeased with him. He shows up even less frequently than the other Pillar family leaders, although everyone knows it most likely has something to do with his missing wife. Sympathy isn't something you find often. Shoo, don't speak too loudly. Come closer, there's another big piece of information I heard, but it's been being kept hush-hush. After pausing to look around, the student continued, I hear that senior sister Ava was one of the casualties in the Elf bang. A dense killing intent shook Diane's concealment array. In a flash he disappeared, speeding towards Eli's room as fast as he could. I owe her. Although I wouldn't have actually died that day due to a life-saving measure I had in place, it still stands that she stood up for me. Then she tried to help when she thought I'd be expelled. If I found out that even one hair on her head was hurt, Diane had had a small clash with Ava after the incident with Darius, but this didn't change how grateful he was to her. To him, she was a dear friend as well as someone who had saved his life twice. Venus opened the door with a confused look, but seeing that there was no one, she closed the door and looked back to her brother. Eli was lying on the bed pale and unmoving. The ragged breaths he took every so often was the only thing that let you believe he was alive. Venus' eyes were red with tears and she stood next to Uncle Ale. Don't worry little Venus, your master will be here soon, I'm sure she has a way of helping. However, this little Ava girl is an odd case, he said looking back at Ava who laid on a table not too far away. She should be dead, but my Aurora is picking up faint signs of life. The sound of shattering glass resounded. Diane's concealment array shattered as he fell on his knees by Eli's bed. Picking up his pale delicate hand. Venus jumped, startled. Leaping backwards with well-trained movement, thorned vines immediately wrapped around Diane, but he didn't seem to feel any pain. Venus was shaken, why is his body so strong? Venus, wait. Uncle Ale went up and touched Diane's shoulder, then pinched himself. Diane, is that really you? Diane smiled bitterly at Uncle Ale. Hey Uncle Ale, long time no see. Venus sighed in relief, but she was still apprehensive. He's so strong. After Venus removed her vines, Uncle Ale clasped Diane's shoulder hard. Good, he said partially choked up, you of all people don't deserve to die so young. Diane patted his back, come on now Uncle Ale, men shouldn't cry so much. I'm here now. So, let's save them. Save them. Is that possible? Uncle Ale could only shake his head looking at Diane, this boy really tries too hard. He's clearly confident he can save them, but his eyes are still red with unshed tears, yet he says men shouldn't cry. Diane looked back at the pale-faced girl, gently pushing her red hair away from her face. She was currently covered in a blanket with her arms hanging out, but Diane could tell she was naked. And he had a pretty good idea of why she would be. Although he looked incomparably calm, the boiling rage within him had lit to a new level. Her soul is damaged. Accessing his master's memories, Diane began to piece it together. After using his aurora to check her body, she used a technique to fake her death, but it clearly comes at a large price. She just needs a soul-mending pill. Venus and Uncle Ale staggered. Being from a family that specialized in alchemy, they knew the value of such a pill. Even Cammy had to pay the price of involving another family in their plans for glory to pay for a pill like that. And that was not to mention the fact that Mayumi's soul damage was significantly less than Ava's. Venus smiled bitterly. Even our Viridi family can't afford to make a pill powerful enough to help mend that damage. I'm afraid we'll have to wait for another opportunity. The uncle-niece pair fell into a bitter silence, feeling that things were still hopeless. Chapter 67. You are listening at novelfull.audio. You must be Eli's elder sister. He's mentioned you before. I'm glad I'm friends with a guy who has such a beautiful sister, Diane said with a smile on his face. Venus blushed. It wasn't as though she had never heard those words before, but the purity in Diane's eyes in combination with his earnestness gave him a charisma she couldn't ignore. Uncle Ale noticed her reaction and chuckled. You know, little Venus, Diane's the one Madeline loves. You'll have quite a lot of competition. That's you. We all thought you were dead. Venus said with a gasp. Diane chuckled bitterly. I kind of had no choice but to fake it. That aside, I should have a way to help them both. But, before I do that, I want to find out what happened to them. Diane's face steeled. Since Diane didn't have the skill of his master, it was hard for him to use the memory search technique. Any slight bit of resistance, even if it was unconscious, would cause damage to his soul. So, it was best if he did it was Ava was incapacitated. Diane trembled as he looked through Ava's memories. He felt her pain at her best friend's betrayal, and anger bubbled over in his heart as he watched the scene that occurred right afterwards. He nearly lost it when he went through Eli's memories. His teeth crushed against each other as his jaw creaked under the strain. His muscles tensed and a dense killing intent filled the room. Storm family. Even Uncle Ale could barely breathe under the aura Diane was releasing. It felt as though if they took a single step, their bodies would be slashed into nothingness. Is this really a guy that Oliver killed? They're not even on the same level, thought Venus, shivering. Venus had met Oliver many times. Compared to Diane, he might as well have been an ant on the side of the road. How did this make any sense? After Diane went through Ava's memories, he closed his eyes, trying to settle himself. Ball. Tammy. The Storm family. Akihiko. Oliver. The Kami family. The Sapientia family. The Dayu family. With a flash, 10 medicinal pills appeared. These are, they're soul-mending pills, but the potency. It's not enough. Thought Uncle Ale. Diane's eyes flashed with gold, tens of tiny arrays appeared around each pill. They floated into the air, being slowly broken apart into their original ingredients. This is, innate aurora, wait will of time. No, using arrays to perform alchemy. Wait, is it both? Venus was shocked. Uncle Ale trembled, barely containing his excitement. This is what I meant. You can't reach higher levels of alchemy unless you understand arrays, and vice versa. Diane is literally defying the heavens by combining weaker pills to form a stronger one. It's ridiculous. What level is his will of time at? This will is so rare, I have no way to judge. This was why it took Diane an entire half-month to understand the pill condensation technique. Not only did it require his aurora flames to strengthen its healing property, he needed to understand the will of time, which was an incomparably abstract will. As though that wasn't already enough, he needed a thorough understand of the pills, so he spent days at a time meditating on pill theory and alchemy. In the end, it took more time than even gaining decent understanding of space, celestial, wind and sword wills combined. Beads of sweat fell down Diane's forehead as the pills finally fully separated. Then, the massive array covered everything. The pill's parts began to condense into a single form, a holy light shining down on it. Diane didn't want heaven's chime to ring, but he had no choice. If he didn't go all out, Ava might not wake up. Chime. Chime. Heaven's chimes, he did it. Venus was shocked. Uncle Ale stood by Diane, smiling brightly. Delia looked up at the moon, hearing the chime sound off. Could it be him? Then she shook her head bitterly. With how many geniuses there are here for the big sect tournament, it could be any one of them. You'd think I would have stopped hoping by now. I should head to Sapientia Peak so I can be ready to help Madeline early tomorrow. Back in Eli's room, Diane was slowly circulating the pill within Ava's body using his aurora flame. An hour later, Ava slowly opened her eyes. Ava. Diane, what are you doing here? She said groggily. Wait, what? Diane. Ava's eyes flashed in disbelief. Unable to control herself, she flew up and hugged Diane tightly. As Diane was enjoying the soft sensation, Uncle Ale had turned away blushing. Venus coughed in teasing disdain. You sure have a lot of women. Ava, finally realizing she was naked, screamed, "Ah! You pervert!" She hid her body under the blanket and cuddled in the corner, her scarlet red face matching her hair. Diane grinned. You left too soon. I was enjoying that. Humph, wait until I tell Madeline. She'll set you right. Wait, you know she's getting married soon, right? What day is it? Diane's face distorted. Married. Uncle Ale smiled bitterly. I didn't get a chance to tell you because of the situation, but Madeline is getting married tomorrow as the opening ceremony for the big sect tournament. Big sect tournament. Seems like I'll be able to do two things I want in a day. Save Madeline and enter the world they'll be opening soon. It'll be hard this time, Diane. The seeded geniuses like my sister are participating, and the Storm family has a whole bunch of new members all of a sudden. Hearing the Storm family be brought up, Ava shivered. Her eyes brimmed with tears she refused to let fall. Diane, noticing this, gently touched her knee. You don't need to say anything, Ava, I know what happened. I'll make sure that you can kill him with your own hands. I promise. Although he said nothing to Venus, she could see his meaning in his eyes. Her eyes brimmed with tears as she looked towards Eli's shivering body. Ava looked up in surprise, but seeing the resolute look on Diane's face, she finally couldn't stop the tears anymore. She nodded firmly. All right, your situation was the most dire, but I need to save Eli now. Diane walked to the bed, lightly touching Eli's chest and allowing his aurora flames to circulate. His spine is broken. Diane trembled in anger but fought to maintain his focus. Chapter 68. You are listening at novelfull.audio. His flames focused on their healing character, slowly and delicately mending his severed nerves and sheared bones. Although he could use a medicinal pill to do this much quicker, Diane had learned that pills were akin to a common cold medicine. A one fix for all. Although it would work, lower-level pills would be too general to really help much of anything, which is why higher-level pills were usually much more specific. However, higher-level pills would most likely still be too general. Often, medicine alchemy specialists create new pill formulae on a case-by-case basis. At least, that's what the top-tier professionals would do. This was not to say that medicinal pills were moot, as they were very useful as a quick fix in battle, for example, but Diane preferred to be diligent with a friend he cared for as much as Eli. Although they had only known each other for a few months, Eli's awkward nature and kind soul had touched Diane. This was a friend one wouldn't meet often. As much as Eli idolized Diane, Diane placed Eli on the same pedestal. Ava, Venus and Uncle Ale watched anxiously off to the side, holding their breaths in delight when they noticed the color returning to Eli's face. Eli's eyes slowly opened as he groaned. Diane, Eli sighed, I guess I did die then. I hope Big Sister Venus doesn't blame herself. What kind of brother can't protect his own sister, ah? Venus flew into Eli's arms, sobbing, I'm sorry, I'm sorry. Eli's eyes were still out of focus, but when he heard Venus' voice, he trembled. Venus. Did you die too? Eli's fists clenched in anger, his eyes tearing up, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Eli held on to his sister tightly while Diane smiled off to the side. You idiot, how could you be dead with me here? Diane's grin got wider as Uncle Ale's eyes reddened. Ava smiled a sad smile off to the side, thinking about her brother and her supposed best friend. She had known for a long time that Tammy had loved her elder brother, but she now knew that clearly relationships like that didn't run too deeply for Tammy. She might delude herself into thinking she had no other choice, but when you truly love and care for someone, would something as ridiculous as that even matter? Ava was disgusted with the martial world, its principles and its doctrines. She wanted nothing more than to love with all her heart and protect those she wanted to protect. But, it seemed like no one else cared for things like that. However, when she saw Venus and Eli crying in each other's arms, each having been hurt in their own way trying to protect the other, Ava smiled. Maybe there's hope after all. With everyone healthy, Diane took a deep breath and steadied his mind. Tomorrow, I'll start with the Sapientia and Cami family. When the time is right, I'll make the Storm family witness something worse than death. Early the next morning, the center pillar roof was bustling with people. Focus Lake was filled with silver boats and the tunnels were flooded with people making their way to the grand event, unbothered by the dense cold and falling snow. Pillar family leader Cami walked respectfully behind a middle-aged man. Even the crowds of thousands seemed to know to part ways for him. Right this way, Big Sect Elder Cami. The rest of the Big Sect representatives are in the VIP area. It's quite funny really, usually only one was enough to represent all of the sects, but today they've all come because the seated geniuses have decided to participate. AI, it seems as though your son's soon-to-be wife has quite a number of suitors. He's brought pride to the Cami God clan. Although we are mere branches, if he continues to work hard and improve, we believe he can one day reach that peak. I hope he doesn't let down the intentions of our branch. Cami nodded obediently, of course, of course. He's prepared to work very hard. In fact, he's broken through to the 9th layer of the foundation stage now that his god-level blood is slowly awakening more and more. Not bad, not bad. Such a young peak foundation stage expert. He can lift his head high in many places. The two Cami family members reached a box lookout. It was the highest point in Focus Academy and it looked down on a massive stadium. Today, the clouds were so thick that the bottom of the center pillar was cut off from the view of the top. A sea of fluffy white made it seem like the roof was floating on clouds, which was emphasized by the slowly falling snow. Ah, Big Sect Elder Cami, you're quite fashionably late. If you were part of the main Cami branch, I'd understand, but don't you think it's a bit disrespectful in this context? A fat robust man spoke as soon as he noticed Elder Cami enter the box lookout. Knowing he had no place there, Cami bowed and immediately left. Nice to see you too, Orbis. Is your seated disciple still as lazy as always? Elder Cami asked with a faint smile. Orbis was about to respond and a feminine voice cut it. No use in arguing. Although we're not sure why you're so cocky these days, it remains that we're the representatives of the big sects. Squabbling amongst ourselves doesn't set a good example for the young. My Windblade sect won't stand for it. The three other elders could only shake their heads, witnessing a scene that they had seen all too often. Saying nothing else, the 6 elders took their seats. Earth, Bound, Wind Blade, Destruction, Green Blade, Fire Sword, and Infinite Art sects were all there. It was about time for the wedding ceremony to begin. To Cami, this was of course the most important. However, the other sect leaders were eager to watch whose geniuses bested whose. It was the reason they came in the first place. The idea of recruiting disciples, what should have been the true purpose on their minds, was actually the furthest thing from their thoughts. Slowly, the crowd began to settle into their seats. No one noticed a young man sitting amongst the clouds, even higher than the box lookout, staring at the scene with an incomparably calm gaze while he stoked his burning fury. Chapter 69. You are listening at novelfull.audio. In a dressing room, a girl dressed in all black was being groomed by an olive-skinned girl and a fair-skinned girl. A knock came at the door, startling them all from their daze. Akihiko walked in with a smile, but it immediately turned ugly as he noticed the color of Madeline's dress. "Meiying, Delia, leave us for a moment," said Akihiko in a stern voice. They looked towards Madeline, but they only saw a gentle smile. "You guys can go, I'm ready anyway. I'll have to deal with him eventually." Madeline's voice was shaky. It was clear that her trembling was much worse on this today. She was trying very hard to control what she was feeling, but it was becoming increasingly difficult. The two girls walked out and Akihiko slowly walked to the door and locked it. "Are you wearing black for him?" Akihiko said faintly. "You already know the answer, so why do you bother asking? Slap. Madeline tumbled across the room, her face stinging. The feeling of the rough palm rebounding against her delicate skin was seared onto her mind. It was as though she was experiencing it again and again without pause. She made no sounds as she slowly got up and wiped the blood from her lips. There was no point in resisting, she had no access to her cultivation at the moment. All she felt was a burning sensation in her body, as though lava was being poured down her throat. Yet, her skin still felt so cold, leaving goosebumps trailing up her skin. This was the worst she had felt in her entire life. To attend my wedding with a cut lip and a bruised face, how scandalous. You think I'll bother to properly cover this us? We'll let people see you for who you truly are. Akihiko shook in anger, before grabbing Madeline's chin and thrusting her against a wall. He forced open her mouth and shoved a medicinal pill into it, not allowing her to breathe until she swallowed it. After Akihiko felt that the pill had worked well enough, his gaze of anger turned to lust. He stood over her, his eyes no different from a beast's. Madeline clenched her jaw, but her vision was going red. Rage, humiliation, fury, the likes of which she had never felt before. Akihiko chuckled, "I don't know why you bother to fight it. Tonight, I'll take your everything. Your first kiss. Your virginity. Your will. In fact, considering the beast you'll be tonight when the moon rises, you might want to try things I've never even thought of before. You can have your little rebellion for now, it'll be over soon anyway." Madeline slumped to the floor, refusing to cry as Akihiko walked away. After the door opened, Meiying and Delia stared coldly at Akihiko before rushing inside. "Big sister." They cried together. Madeline smiled, "I'm okay, I just got flushed thinking about the harem I'll have in a few years." Delia and Meiying could only smile sad smiles, but they were helpless to do anything. Akihiko walked towards the ceremonial setup to prepare. "You must be thinking that after you're cured you'll be able to beat me down. Maybe even kill me and marry another man later. I'm sorry to disappoint you. But, tonight, you really will lose everything. Including all of your cultivation and potential. Then, I'll use that to rule the second day of the tournament and make sure the big secs know that it wasn't just my talent that earned me a seated spot, it's my strength too." A cold smile appeared on Akihiko's face, oblivious to the disaster he had brought upon himself. Music began to play. Elegant strings inlaid will of at least the third level through the crowd, making them feel at peace. Akihiko walked to a podium facing the crowd. He wore a changpoa laced with gold and whites, standing proudly. The crowd's gaze was one part reverence and another part deep-seated hatred and jealousy. They wished with their everything that they could be Akihiko in that moment. The wedding was actually held in a coliseum, However, the ground floor was filled with Pillar family members as the competition stages had been swapped for exorbitant decorations, place tables, and what seemed like endless food and baked goods. The geniuses of the big sects sat on the floor of the Colosseum as well, gazing at Akihiko with disgust and jealousy. He may be talented, but he's still too weak and young to be a seated genius. We'll beat him to a pulp during the tournament proceedings. The other seated geniuses nodded in heavy agreement with Lehabim. They had all had great fortuitous encounters in the elven forest, making their power soar. Their consolation prize would be showing off and fighting to see who was the best among them. In the crowd, Ava, Eli and Venus looked nervous. They were the only ones who knew that Dian was alive, and they were absolutely certain that he wouldn't allow this to continue. But, no matter what they thought of, none of their ideas translated to his victory. If he saved Madeline, how long would it last before he was killed again? Even if he could now beat Oliver, what about Oliver's father? What about Akihiko's father? What if the other Pillar families join in? And isn't Akihiko part of a big sect now? How could they allow him to be cuckolded in front of thousands of people? They would rather die than be shamed like that. The lines of worry increased minute by minute as Chenglei walked up behind Akihiko and discreetly handed him a ring. It seemed as though this would be a very streamlined wedding, most likely to keep Madeline in line. Delicate snow continued to fall from the sky. However, by some odd magic, the ground maintained the absolute purity of the snow, without dirtying. At the same time, the tables of food maintained their heat as though the snowflakes couldn't enter a meter radius of them. It was like a paradise of snow as the music picked up. The crowd stood in respect as Madeline walked into sight. However, the gasps that were heard were followed by endless whispers. This wasn't because of her beauty, but rather because of the clear statement she was making. Whether it was her intention or not, it felt as though the faces of the Kami and Sapientia clans were being slapped. Chapter 70. You are listening at novelfull.audio. She's wearing black. Her father isn't escorting her. Only two little girls. It seems the rumors are true, this must be the poor girl's last rebellion. Despite what was said, Madeline was like the purest lily. She was untouched, untainted. Her beauty couldn't be described with words. Even her slightly pale appearance couldn't manage to dull her to the point of flaws. Even in sickness, she was a celestial goddess. Her gaze was expressionless, and her steps were firm. Although her body imperceptibly trembled as she began to lose more and more control of herself, she knew she had to keep it together. At the very least, she refused to disgrace Dian. The Sapientia family gazed at her with bright smiles on their faces, but she didn't spare them a glance as she continued walking along her solemn path. Our goddess is truly strong, praised Jessica. She doesn't deserve this, she deserves me. I can make her happy, muttered Hashem. I've changed my mind, even if it means war, I'll directly kill Akihiko, spoke Lehabim, gripping his fists tightly. Yeah right, your master would stop you before you could even do that. Do you think the Essence Gathering realm is a joke? Spoke Orbis sarcastically, you all should find a single lady like I have with my love. Who's your love? As the geniuses were warring in hushed tones, Madeline had made it to wide stairs. The Colosseum was silent as her delicate and lonely footsteps made it to the top. Delia and Meiying were like ghosts following her. They stood silently to the side as the Sapientia family head could only smile bitterly as he saw his daughter's attitude. He thought that when she had agreed to stop fighting this that she would feel good about being cured. But, it seemed he was too na.ve. She had never done this for herself or him, she did this so she could live and repay a debt to that dead boy. Pillar family head Kami stood at the podium as a witness. Once he saw that Madeline had made it and hadn't caused too much of a scene, he breathed a sigh of relief. His voice boomed, entering the ears of everyone there. Today we've come together to collect the Sapientia family and Kami family as one. In consideration for the big sect tournament, the new soon-to-be husband and wife pair have decided on a shorter, but elegant, ceremony. Although this is usually done in private, we want you all to be witness to their holy union. As such, the marriage license will be signed here and now." Kami waved his hand. A group of servants came out of the back room with a podium that had a thick piece of parchment on it in addition to a feathered pen. "Little Madeline, soon will be as father and daughter. As a woman marrying into the Kami family, you should follow our traditions as well. The Kami God clan places the utmost importance on bloodlines, particularly the God-level blood. As you all know, my son has awakened his God blood to 20%. Which is even comparable to geniuses in the main branch." The crowd filled with murmurs. "He's so powerful. Maybe he does deserve to marry Lady Sapientia." The geniuses of the big sects grit their teeth and endured. As such, it is customary for Kami God clan marriages to seek acceptance of the ancestors by signing the marriage contract in blood. Only a finger prick will be necessary. After the couple has finished, we can begin the festivities. After a proper feast, the tournament will begin. The crowd watched on as Akihiko picked up the feathered pen and pricked his finger, signing his name in blood. The parchment began to resonate with the heavens, as though Akihiko's blood was bestowed by the heavens themselves. As expected of the Kami sect's seated genius. The contract isn't even complete, yet he's already gained the acceptance of the ancestors, big sect elder Kami boomed from the box lookout. Akihiko passed the pen to Madeline with a gentle look in his eyes, but Madeline's face couldn't help but flash with disdain as she noticed the hints of lust in his eyes. Taking a deep breath, she tried to steady her trembling body. Although her face was incomparably calm, her heart was a raging storm of emotions. Tears threatened to spill out of her eyes as she couldn't seem to steady her hand to draw blood. Many of those who sympathized with Madeline couldn't help but sigh. Just as Madeline was about to give up and use a bigger target than the tip of her finger, a light voice rang out that made the tears she was holding back spill over as wave after wave of emotion hit her. "Hold on, wait. Can we talk about this for a second? I know you want this whole streamlined wedding thing, but what kind of marriage doesn't ask what the crowd thinks first? I don't know about the martial world, but in the human world we have a place called Las Vegas. You can think of them as the king of streamlined marriages. And even they ask if someone wants to speak or forever hold their peace. And here I was counting on the Kami family to follow proper protocol. I had so much faith in you fucks that I almost let my woman be married to some loser. Imagine the laughing stock I'd be if that happened." The sarcasm dripping from the voice was obvious for all to see. In fact, it wasn't like this voice was exactly incorrect. The Kami and Sapientia clan had tacitly decided not to ask for dissenting opinions, knowing that the seated youths in the crowd were still so rowdy. However, everyone had chosen to ignore this for fear of offending two massive clans. Just who was bold enough to say these things? Were they tired of living?